Hey guys, so this video is going to be one of the most important videos if you're doing any kind of email marketing. And what we're talking about today is segmentation. Now, segmentation is really important, and it's one of the biggest areas that we see brands really kind of miss out on or mess up on in general. And what it ends up leading to is people who aren't interested in receiving your content, receive your content. You end up getting higher unsubscribe rates, you end up getting higher marked as spam rates, and ultimately ESPs, so email service providers, end up looking at you and being like, you know what, probably shouldn't be going to the inbox, right? So it's really important to look at segmentation that you have currently with your campaigns, how you're segmenting out flows as well. In this video, we're going to walk through step by step exactly how we do that with our clients. The first thing we're going to run through is just a segmentation overview. The second is how to actually segment. And then the third piece is key segments that you're going to want to use for your store as well. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll dive right in. Okay, so what is a segment? A segment is a group of contacts with a certain set of conditions. Segments are dynamic, meaning that they're going to shrink and grow depending on how many people and if those people meet certain conditions or criteria, whereas lists are static, meaning they grow as people subscribe or unsubscribe. The key to effective marketing is getting the right message in front of the right people at the right time. This is why segmentation is so important, because you can have the right message in front of the wrong people or sent at the wrong time, and that marketing will fail. So segmentation, like I said, is absolutely crucial here. The quickest way to end up in the spam folder is by batching and blasting every single person on your list. General rules of thumb here that you want to stick to is the higher the frequency you send, the more strict you want to be with who you're sending to, i.e. if you're sending 3 times a week, you could be doing a 60, 90, or 120 day engaged audience. If you're sending 4 times a week, you should be doing less than that, right? Or if you're doing 2 times a month, you could be doing a 90-day engage, but if you're doing 4 times a week, you should be doing significantly less than that, or just looking at different segments and being more specific about who you're actually sending to. Now, high segmentation is what we would consider as about less than 20% of your list. Mid segmentation is about 20 to 90% of your list. Low or no segmentation is effectively just like the entire list, or like 90+% of your list. Now, just before we dive deeper into the segmentation piece, this is kind of a helpful chart that we use to just consider where people might be at in their buying journey and really like how frequently we should be sending emails to those specific people. Highly engaged people, typically we're going to get a 20% plus open rate. There might be 30,000 profiles in that highly engaged audience. The email frequency, they're going to get pretty much all of the emails we're sending. So for example, here, if we're sending 10 emails total per month, they would get 10 times a month. The medium to high engaged would kind of be the 15 to 20% open rate. So they're still opening a fair amount. It's probably about 50,000 profiles, and they get about 75% of the monthly emails. So about, 7 out of those 10. The low to high engaged people, this is including everyone from like low, medium to high. These open rates are going to fall a little bit. So you might be shooting for like 10, 15%. Typically, we're going to be shooting for a little bit higher than that, but profiles would be 75,000 out of 100,000, and then they'd receive about 50% of your monthly emails. So again, if you're sending 10, they'd receive 5. And finally, you get the churn risk, and basically everyone else on your list. You have the full 100,000 profiles that you're sending to. Open rates are not going to be anywhere near as high, and typically you don't want to send these people every single email you're sending. You might send them an email every, it could be a couple times a year. With Black Friday, Cyber Monday, that's the main time really, and like maybe the odd flash sale that we're going to be wanting to send to the entire list. Now, you might want to send to people a little bit more frequently than that if they're not quite completely unengaged, but this is just kind of like a rough outline that we look at. Some additional notes to look at here. If you haven't checked out the list cleaning video, please check that out, because it's going to be very important when we're talking about segmentation as well. It's absolutely crucial that you understand the importance of list cleaning and what goes into list cleaning on a monthly or quarterly or biannual basis. Also, just keep in mind there's another video as well on Apple's iOS 15 MPP opens, so that's another thing to check out as well. Now, what are some of the conditions that you can use for segmentation? I wrote out an entire list here, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk through in Klavyio itself and just show you exactly how you can select those conditions and the conditions that you can use as well. So let me just share my screen here. Okay, so when we're in this page, and if you don't know how to get to this page, you go go to list and segments on the left-hand side, and then you would just name the segment. We'll just call this test here. And then what you want to do is select the condition. So the conditions you can use is what someone has or has not done, properties about someone, if someone is or is not within the EU, someone's proximity to a location, if someone is or is not in a list, and if someone can or cannot receive marketing. Now, this is a piece that they recently changed. So you can actually see here, they recently changed is or is not suppressed. So if you see that anywhere, is or is not suppressed, that is effectively what this has been changed to. And then finally, predictive analytics about someone. Now, this is going to be restricted to people who effectively they're getting more than 500 purchases. There's a lot of data that Klavyio can use and leverage to build those predictive analytics about someone. So diving in here a little bit further. So what someone has or hasn't done. Effectively, what you're going to do here is then select a metric or something that someone has or hasn't done, right? So you could see like bounced email. Very frequently we used clicked email or opened email, but you can use so many different kind of filters here. I won't rattle them all off because you can read, right? But you can see like there's so many different filters that we can use. You could say like fulfilled order. Again, like we use that quite frequently. We use placed order quite frequently, refunded order. And then once you've selected that, so let's say we decide, okay, you know what? We want to filter based off of opened email. Then you can filter based off of a time. So at least once would mean someone has done whatever action this is at least once. 0 times, 0 times. Equals, this would mean like you only want to hit people who have opened an email once. That would be, you know, equals 1. Doesn't equal. So this would mean anything that doesn't equal, for example, 0. Is at least, is greater than, right? So this, those would both be like, okay, it's someone has opened the email at least twice, or it's greater, someone has opened the email is greater than 3 times, is less than, same deal there. And then is at most, again, you're looking at a different filter here where it's like, okay, at most they've opened the email twice. Now, once you select this will actually change here, because if you want to say like is greater than, it's going to enter a number there. Is at least once, right, is not going to give you an opportunity to add a number there. So I'm going to say is at least, and then I'm going to say 4 times overall time. And then you can actually select overall time in the last, which would be in the last 90 days type of thing. So you can select this and say like the last 30 days. The next piece would be between. So it would be like between 30 and, you know, let's say 90 days. You can also select before, right? So this is before a certain date, after a certain date, and then between certain dates. So that's kind of what you can select in terms of what someone has and hasn't done. You can also add further filters here. And the further filters you can add are basically like, okay, a frequent one that we'll use is maybe they have received a campaign name, or they, for example, here, maybe they opened a certain campaign, right? So we could say has opened, I'm going to make something at least once overall time. So I'm going to say has opened an email at least once overall time where the campaign name equals, and then you would just select the campaign name here. So a lot of filtration that you can do here. Again, each different setting here that you're selecting will give you different options as well, right? Different options more specifically here. Now, the next piece would be properties about someone. So this is more so just like if you have standard properties, or if you've added additional properties, like one of the properties you're going to want to add is unsubscribed, for example, or unengaged, for example, right? So you could say unengaged is true. And there's a lot of other properties here as well, right? Again, I'm not going to read all of these out for you, but you could say like first name is, or last active, or phone number, or state, or region. There's a lot of different filtrations that you can use here as well. Beyond that, this one's pretty self-explanatory. Just if someone is or is not within the EU, someone's proximity to a location. This is obviously it requires to have their address initially. So if they are within X amount of miles or kilometers, if you're in Canada, right, of X postal code in X country. Also pretty beneficial, especially if you have brick and mortar locations and you just want to send to certain people in certain locations who purchased from you. If you haven't previously segmented that, if someone is or is not in a list, right, you then go ahead and choose this list. You can also segment a little bit further based off of the date added. You can also say is not in this list, right? If someone can or cannot receive marketing. So this is going to be very important. You're going to want to pretty much include this on every segment. If someone can or cannot receive marketing, the person can receive email marketing. If they cannot receive email marketing, that means they're suppressed. essentially. So like that, those people should already be suppressed. So you don't really need to include them again in the exclusions. Finally, predictive analytics. This is where you can just choose additional predictive analytics here. There's a whole section and a whole video on predictive analytics because it's a beast, but that's another way that you can kind of go ahead and segment out there. So that's essentially some of the conditions you can use for segmentation, the conditions based off of a specific date. And the next big thing is using the and or connector. So basically what this means is it can be used to make segments more exclusive, right? So a customer must meet all of the segment conditions. So if I were to go in here and say, you know, someone has, I'm going to go back to this, someone has opened an email at least once over all time, and they also have clicked an email at least once over all time. What that's saying now is that they must have done both. So it's saying a customer must meet all of your segment conditions, right? Using the or connector can make the segment more inclusive, meaning like if I went back in here and I was like, instead of doing and, I said or, and then I did the exact same thing. I don't need to necessarily build it out for you guys, but I did the exact same thing here. That would make it more inclusive. So it could be like, oh, if someone opened an email or if they clicked an email. Now that might be a little bit of a ridiculous statement, but nonetheless, that would make it a little bit more inclusive, right? You could say opened an email or purchased, right? Here, I'll build out this example for you. So if you said opened email and ordered, placed order at least once, that would mean someone would have to open the email and also place the order. If you said here though, that what someone has done, and then you went placed order at least once over all time, that could mean they opened an email or they placed an order. That's not, you know, you're not making it exclusive. So you're making it a little bit more lax and a little bit more open in terms of what actually is included there. Be careful with this, especially with negative conditions, because if we want to create a segment of people who do not live in Canada or the US, and if we use or here, the people will only need to meet one of these conditions, right? So the segment will not work because each condition is allowing the other condition to exist with the use of or. So hopefully that makes sense. This is a really important video, and this is kind of like the initial overview of segmentation. In the next video, we're going to run through exactly how to segment and what we're looking for when we're segmenting. Thanks so much for watching. And if you did like the video, feel free to like and subscribe. It does really help out a lot. And if you do have a D2C brand and you'd like our help, feel free to check out the links in the description below. For brands doing over $50,000 a month, you can apply to work with our agency. And for brands doing less than $50,000 a month, you can apply for our email mastery program.